The Weather Lounge podcast is brought to you by CrewTracker Software.
This is the Weather Lounge here at WeatherWorks.
Hi there, everyone, and thanks for joining us once again in the Weather Lounge. I'm your host, meteorologist Brad Miller. Actually, no, I'm meteorologist Mike Prianti, and we're here with our high-flying podcast coming to you from the tarmac of our WeatherWorks headquarters located in Hackettstown, New Jersey. And joining me, as always, here in the Weather Lounge is my co-pilot, meteorologist Mike Mahalik. And Mike, I noticed that Brad is not in today. Do you know where he is?
No idea. I don't know where you're going with this either, because you're talking about tarmacs, high-flying, co-pilots. I mean, I get an idea.
Can you guess what our topic is going to be about today?
Yeah, I know. You're making the kind of insinuations on who we might be talking to, and I'm thinking it has to do something with flying airplanes.
You are right. You are clear for takeoff, Mike.
Oh my God. That's these puns are out of control. I thought Brad was bad, but
Hey, look, Brad wrote this, guys. So if you want to complain to anybody, Brad wrote this. So my hands are clean.
You know what? That explains a lot. You know, this doesn't seem like something you would write, Mike. So that's why, yeah, I get it now. Yeah, this is definitely a Brad over the top, trying to be funny piece. Brad, if you're listening to this podcast, it's not funny.
We'll see what our listeners think. Hopefully we haven't already bored them. But you know what, Mike? I think that's enough. I think we need to introduce our guest today. And if you haven't noticed already, we are going to be talking about aviation and its impact in the weather world. And of course, we have brought on a fellow meteorologist who works here at WeatherWorks, Nate Waltman. And he knows a little thing or two about aviation and kind of how pilots deal with the weather on a day-to-day basis. So without further ado, let's join him in the Weather Lounge. And Nate, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome.
So, Nate, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in aviation, and this might go hand in hand with you obtaining your degree in meteorology.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, there's two things I've always really loved in life since I was, very young, and those two things are weather and aviation. So when I went to school and picked up meteorology, it seemed to almost fit naturally. I always kind of wanted to do something with aviation, and so when I learned about aviation meteorology, it really piqued my interest, and I took quite a few great classes at Valparaiso University, where I studied for meteorology, and they had great aviation classes available, and it really helped boost my, I guess, my skill in forecasting for aviation, and actually led to me getting a few internships.
Great. So does that mean you can fly a plane?
I mean, I wouldn't say that I can, but I certainly have. I've been up in the plane.
Wait.
Hold on a
You
second.
wouldn't say you can, but you have.
So I can taxi the planes and I can take them off. I just haven't mastered the landing part. So,
that's probably one of the most important things about flying, right? Because, think about it. You're in the air, and all of a sudden there's an emergency. You need to be able to know how to land the plane. So I think that's the most important part. I don't know. I'm not a pilot.
So he's like Indiana Jones.
Pretty much, yeah.
Because Indiana Jones can never land it. You could always, right?
Any landing you can walk away from is a good one. That's
well, I mean, anybody can land a plane. It's just not going to be the right landing.
No,
right?
Absolutely not. But no, I had a pilot, fly with me and kind of show me the ropes, and he let me take the controls a few times. So yeah, I had and him instructing me, and got to fly around in the plane. So
and definitely talking about F-18s and stuff, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Big fighter jets and massive 747s. So
Okay, sorry, getting off topic a little bit, but so you have a lot of experience with aviation and meteorology kind of going hand in hand. So let's talk a little bit about how meteorology and aviation are related with a historical aspect. You know, how did this start? I mean, I could see the relationship already, but let's go through a little bit of the history of their, I guess, partnership.
Yeah, sure. I mean, aviation and meteorology have always been hand in hand, like you said. Even back to the first flight at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, almost 120 years ago now. It was back in 1903, and the Wright brothers actually requested a forecast for the surface winds for that first flight. So, all the way back to the very first flight ever, meteorologists have been necessary for those flights to be successful. um, and going into the 1900s, then we had quite a few aviation forecasts started propping up in the late 1910s and 1920s. And with the Second World War, aviation meteorology really took off, no pun intended, as all these pilots in the war kind of need to know, hey, what are the conditions going to be? Are we going to be able to see the targets we're going for? Or are we going to be able to take off? Or hey, are we going to have a place to land when we come home? So it's really grown since then. And obviously after World War II, with jet planes and commercial aircraft really taking off again, it just has only blossomed this growing industry.
Yeah, sure. And obviously, with the war effort and stuff like that, I know that weather was a huge part of the D-Day operation, and how that was accomplished. And I know there was a specific window they had to hit for the bombers to see their targets and all that kind of stuff. So so it's unfortunate sometimes that things like war prompt advances in technology, but sometimes it does because it's so crucial to make that mission a success. So um, it's definitely interesting how that how that develops for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of those pieces of technology you mentioned even was radar. Actually, the first radars were developed in World War II because they wanted to see, hey, where are the enemy planes? Are there bombers coming in to attack us? And when they activated the radar, all of a sudden they're like, oh, what are these strange readings we're getting? And all of a sudden they realized they were picking up thunderstorms, and so they were detecting rain and thunderstorms. And they said, well, hey, that's not right. We don't want to detect that. We want to detect the planes. And so it kind of got in the way. But following the war, they kind of took a step back and realized, hey, this could be really useful. We could use this to forecast the weather and know what's going on in real time, and use an actual tool other than just our eyes to detect what's happening with the storms.
Now, do you think if there weren't any wars, like, do you think this technology would have would we have probably, I'm thinking outside the box here. I'm trying to think if like, because obviously you said that radar was developed kind of to detect enemy bombers, but weather was sort of like oh, that's unfortunate. We can see rain. Actually, wait a minute. No, that's great. We can see that. It's good for the industry down the road. But if that never happened, if we didn't have any wars, would we have maybe never got into this technology until later on? You think?
Yeah, it's certainly possible. I think we would have definitely developed radar, one way or another, with all of our advances in, electromagnetic, research. But it definitely wouldn't have been at the rate that it did develop back in the war. It certainly wouldn't have been until I would say at least the 50s or 60s before they even thought about, hey, we could use this to possibly pick up things in the air. So it was, it honestly, like you said, it's really tragic that we have to have the war to kind of, drive these technological advances, but it really does kind of expedite the process of coming up with these new technologies.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like it would follow eventually that we would have came up with something like that because I mean, if you're talking about the Wright brothers and them needing the weather for their first flight. You would think that, well, if they need the weather, there's got to be a better way to see the weather, and then it eventually probably would have came about. But yeah, I mean, I think I agree here. I mean, obviously, we're all just speculating whether or not that really would have happened. But or how fast it would have happened, but yeah, I think it was certainly sped up with that process. Um, but moving on, so yeah, the radar was developed, so we could see the weather and all that, and to detect airplanes and all that. But before you go out, even to fly a plane, I'm sure there's some sort of briefing that's required before this happens.
Yeah, no, every actually it's mandated. Every pilot that goes to fly, whether it's just a big commercial airline or some military flight or even just random guy in his little old single engine plane, they have to call up a certified meteorologist and receive a weather briefing, telling them, hey, here's your conditions for the flight, here's what you can expect, and here's the airports you can land at, because some pilots aren't skilled enough to land in certain conditions, so they need to know, is it going to be safe enough for me to come back home.
So is there like some sort of rating system for the pilot of saying how skilled they are?
Yeah, so I mean, it goes by visual flight rules and instrument flight rules. The all commercial pilots are required to actually have instrument ratings, but general aviation, which is your standard business airplanes, or just your casual planes that you fly around for fun. Most of those pilots don't really go for the instrument rating and just rely on visual flight rules. So when it comes to that, it really depends on how much visibility there is, what the sky conditions are like, if they can see where they're going, if they can see the runway that they're going to land at. Because without the instruments, without an instrument rating, you won't really know where you're going if you're flying into some clouds. So yeah, they require all these commercial and even cargo and military to hold instrument ratings so that they can fly in just about any condition.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I mean, just from the general public's perspective, flying in an airplane, like, you got to think like that these pilots really got to know kind of where they're headed toward, and like got to know the conditions, ahead of time. Like, you can't just, when you're on the road and you're driving your car, you got to kind of know what you're headed toward, because sometimes a thunderstorm could, it'll drop the visibility. You could hydroplane, there's a lot of things you got to look out for when you're driving a car. I imagine it's different for a plane at a different level, but you still got to kind of know the conditions, understand, what you're flying into. So,
Absolutely. And, they actually use a tiered system, meteorologists do, to communicate to the pilots, what kind of conditions are at the airport. And so there's, surface stations at almost every airport, kind of nationwide, especially the major ones. And they have, four categories of VFR, MVFR, IFR, and LIFR. And so that, VFR, that's visual flight rules. So, that fits under the visual category. And so does MVFR as well. If you think about it, it's kind of like a stoplight for the pilots, where, VFR is kind of your green, MVFR is yellow, and then IFR, that's when you need to have an instrument rating to land at that airport. And so that's kind of like the red light, and that says, hey, don't come here. These conditions are kind of bad. Unless you really know what you're doing, you shouldn't try to land here. And then LIFR, that's the really bad one, and that's when conditions are, clouds are less than 500 feet above the ground and visibility is less than a mile. So if you can imagine like a blizzard, that's going to be LIFR, and obviously that's like a really really bright red. That's saying, hey, even if you're a really skilled pilot, this is going to be a really tough landing. Don't try this unless you have to.
so does LIFR prevent pilots from like taking off or flying, like, or is that just kind of like a like at your own discretion, or like use caution? Like, I know all the other ones were using caution, but like, is LIFR sort of like a you really 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 shouldn't do this, but is it, or is it more so you can't do it, like we're not going to let you do it?
it can kind of be both. So it depends. If you're instrument rated, they will sometimes let you come in. Obviously, if conditions are really bad, they're just going to ground all the flights. They're going to stop all the traffic. They're going to say, hey, airport shut down, and that's usually right around the LIFR area. So they usually won't let it. But if there's a, plane that's coming in, it's got low fuel, it has to make the landing and they have an instrument rating, they could obviously, attempt it. It's just going to be a really difficult one. And so that's why it's kind of there, is to tell the pilots, hey, this airport's not so great, but then one down the road might be, oh, this is just IFR. You could land here, no problem.
Interesting. Yeah, I just wonder like what that threshold is. I mean, I know there's probably thresholds for each one of these flight rules, but like, you know, as far as you're dealing with a snowstorm, like, is there a certain um, accumulation threshold that's affecting the runway that they can deal with and not deal with? Or I know they always try to clear it and be on top of that, but is there a certain point where it's like, uh, you know this is it, man, we can't do it, this is just bad news?
Yeah, I mean, I would say LIFR is certainly that kind of threshold that says, hey, you shouldn't think about landing here. Most airports are going to shut down at that point. But it's really just it's a visibility and it's a cloud rule actually. So ice and snow doesn't really have any effect on these conditions. The runway could be covered in 12 inches of snow. It could be VFR. It could be, hey, this is a clear airport. So that's where it actually comes into communicating with the airport and the ground crews and saying, hey, what conditions are your runways like? And each time a pilot lands at a commercial airport, they will give a braking action report for the runway they landed on. And so they will, report to the tower. They'll say, hey, we had good braking, or hey, we, started with good braking. Then it kind of, got really icy and slippery. And then we were able to brake again at the end. And so that will tell the tower, hey, like, communicate to other pilots, you should wait, let us clear the runway. Or, hey, pilots, it's good to land here. Even though it's snowing, you're going to have, the ability to stop on the runway.
Yeah, I mean, that always fascinated me a little bit because you talk about driving a car and you run into heavy rain or something like that, and you have the potential to hydroplane. And then here you have a airplane, say, landing or even taking off, and how fast, I mean, I don't know exactly how fast you get until you're able to take off. Maybe this.
It depends on the plane for sure and how much it's weighing, but yeah, you're definitely going to be going at least 150 to maybe even 200 miles an hour before you're taking off. So for bigger planes, I should say the small planes could probably get off about 80 to 100, but yeah, you're definitely going to be going highway speeds.
So yeah, if I am in a bigger airplane and it's raining and I'm going 150 to 200 miles an hour, like, how are we not hydroplaning? I mean, is it just the wheels that they're using, or something like that?
Yeah, so the wheels certainly play into it a bit. It's actually mostly the runway itself. Lots of engineering has gone into the runways, and obviously runway development in the last 100 years. And they've, like they do on some roads, they'll put grooves into the runway, and so that'll kind of mitigate the rain pooling on top. And they even almost will slope the runways just a little bit to kind of allow that rain to kind of run off the sides and not pool up in the center and create a hydroplaning hazard. Different types of concrete are even being developed now, and some of them are able to be porous and allow some of that rain to come through. So, they're always making advances in the engineering for the runways as well as the planes themselves.
So would you say that the runways that they make, they're more so designed for more traction in those instances? And I guess because a NASCAR track is the opposite, I think, right? Or am I getting that wrong? I'm not a NASCAR fan because I know that you can't drive when it's raining for a NASCAR race, right? So like I don't know if there is a difference between the asphalt for a race and then of course on the tarmac.
Well, yeah, I mean, just from my own general knowledge, I mean, you're not going to have grooves in a racetrack,
No, because that
like
slows it
that.
down.
Because that's going because your idea is whole, like, I want to go fast, I want to stick to the road. So you're running, smooth pavements that aren't porous. You're running tires that don't typically have any type of tread on it. It's just slicks. So it's designed for good weather and no rain and all that kind of stuff. So because you're trying to get as fast as possible, but yeah, I mean, any type of rain with a slick tire and a slick track, and is not going to work out. Whereas if you have grooved runways and you have grooved tires on the airplanes, that should allow that rain to kind of channel off more as you go higher and higher speed.
Right, right. And every time a pilot flies, they're also supposed to do a walk around, a pre-flight inspection, and they always are just looking at their plane. They're making sure everything's working. They're making sure everything's in the right order. And one of those checks is the tires. And hey, what condition are the tires in? Are they going to be able to stop? Are they going to be able to have traction? And that's where every pilot's got to know. All right, do I have a chance of rain? Are my tires too worn that they're going to slip on this rain? Or is this runway not the best? If it's going to pull up a bunch of rain, I might slide off the runway. So again, that's where meteorology really comes into it, and why a weather briefing is so crucial for pilots before they fly.
So we were talking about the flying conditions and the IFR and the LIFR ratings. So I guess what happens is that when say it's the summertime and you have a thunderstorm over an airport, um, I suppose this is somehow communicated to the pilot. Hey, saying that, hey, we have a thunderstorm in the area. You're going to have to circle around for a while before you can make this landing, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, thunderstorms can be one of those weather events that shuts down an airport single-handedly. It really depends on the strength of the storm, but there's a lot of dangers that come with thunderstorms to airplanes. One of the major things is actually the winds, because if you could imagine that you're coming into land and your plane will fall out of the sky at 100 miles per hour, and you're coming at 120 miles per hour. If you get a 25-mile-per-hour gust, or even 30 or 40-mile-per-hour gust, and your plane goes down to 80 miles per hour, that's really bad news if you're only 100 or 200 feet off the ground. So it's crucial for pilots to know about thunderstorms, and meteorologists are always on edge about thunderstorms when they're dealing with aviation. It's one of the biggest things that they deal with. Turbulence actually is a major thing with thunderstorms too. A lot of people don't realize, but lots and lots of turbulence is caused from thunderstorms. As those storms go up, they explode up into the air, and then once they hit the top, they kind of stall out, and what they do is they kind of send ripple patterns out in every direction almost, and those ripples are kind of what creates the turbulence. And obviously, if it's a really strong storm, it creates strong turbulence. And if you've ever been in a plane with really bad turbulence before, it's not a fun time.
Well, I haven't been on a flight where it's been that terrible. I mean, yes, I've experienced some turbulence before, but it's kind of like, I don't know. It's almost like hitting like rumble strips or something like that. The whole plane is kind of shaking a little bit and jostling around, and you're kind of like, oh, this is not cool. So,
Yeah, it's like midair
that
speed bumps.
right, and that's not the best thing ever. It doesn't make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside, that's for sure. It just makes me think about what guys like the hurricane hunters go through when they're actually flying through the eye of a strong hurricane. I can't even imagine the type of turbulence that they deal with. I mean,
It takes guts for those guys to fly those planes where they do. I mean, I'll just say that. It takes some real guts for them.
what an experience. Like, I always thought, like, wow, that would be so great to do that and take a ride through and punch the eye, and you get that nice stadium effect looking and stuff. From a meteorological standpoint, man, that's so cool. But from a personal standpoint, I don't know if I'd make it, if you know what I'm saying.
Might need to bring a doggy bag along, right?
A couple of them.
Oh god, yeah, that must be that's required. Yeah, you know, I wonder though because those planes definitely have to be manufactured and designed to survive those kinds of winds because obviously turbulence for a hurricane is nowhere near or probably a little bit higher than turbulence of just a thunderstorm. I mean, you're basically flying higher up, and the winds could be pretty strong up there. So like a passenger plane would not be able to survive flying into the eye of a hurricane.
No, no, not at all. And that's actually why they use the airplanes they do. They use actually military aircraft. The big propeller planes with four props powering it. And you might wonder, well, why haven't they used a jet plane? Why don't they use a big plane with jet engines? You think about it, that hurricane, it's just a wall of water basically. It's all the rain that they're going to fly through. If you've ever seen a video of from the hurricane hunters, I mean, it just looks like a fire hose, just being sprayed on them. So, that obviously doesn't work well with jet engines because, they just like a car engine are, combusting and, you need air and fire and, you know, water doesn't really mix well when you're trying to, light something on fire. So that's why they still use, propeller planes to this day and why they have to use, military aircraft, a bit more, structural integrity to kind of survive those, missions.
Right, I'm sure it's not good for a jet engine to be ingesting all that water.
No, no, they certainly can ingest water, and that's why you'll fly through thunderstorms and rain. But that much water for that long, probably not the best thing for them.
Since 2004, CrewTracker Software has enabled snow and ice management companies to save time, money, and resources with their comprehensive digital services platform. All the information needed to plan your operations and make business decisions is current and always available. Along with QuickBooks, CrewTracker Software provides seamless integration with WeatherWorks certified snowfall totals. Visit CrewTracker.com to rock your game and learn how CrewTracker Software makes managing snow and ice simple. Take advantage of the SIMA Show Special $500 discount and White Glove Startup Service offer.
So you talked a little bit about thunderstorms, but I'm sure there's another thunderstorm hazard besides turbulence that we're thinking about, and some of our listeners probably thinking about, and that's lightning. And how does that affect things? I mean, I know I've seen photos of or videos of people or planes getting hit by lightning, but how does that work, and how are you safe?
I can't imagine myself like being in a plane that gets struck by lightning. I mean, from meteorological side, that sounds cool, but at the same time, that's scary, and I definitely don't want to be in a plane when I get struck.
Yeah, of course. I mean, how many times have you been sitting in your house and lightning hits outside and it sounds like a
Sounds like a bomb
cannon
went
going
off.
off,
Yeah.
or somebody just lit one of those really loud fireworks with not much. You know what I'm saying? That you see on the 4th of July just went off outside your house, and you're like, "Holy smoke!" I'm ready to hit the deck and you know find some cover, and hitting the plane itself can't be great.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly actually, surprisingly, lightning's not a huge issue for aviation and for airplanes, especially. Early on, it definitely was an issue, and obviously, when they were making planes out of wood, certainly not great. But now that we've advanced quite a bit in the last 100 years, most modern airplanes now are surrounded by layers of composite materials, and so if the lightning, hits the outside of the airplane, it's similar to, if it hit a car, it just kind of, radiates around you. It doesn't really affect you. And actually, airplanes are struck by lightning all the time. It's actually quite a common occurrence. You've probably even, been on a flight or two that has been hit and just never knew. My father has been on at least two flights that have been struck by lightning, and he said all that happened was they didn't even hear a bang. They just, the lights kind of flickered really quick, and it, heard like a weird kind of pop sound, and then the pilot came over the radio and was like, "Oh yeah, we just got struck by lightning. No big deal." So
Yeah,
it's
no big deal. It's just casual. Hey, you got struck by lightning. We're still headed to your destination.
we're still on time. No worries. Just a little lightning.
Meanwhile, the Wright brothers get struck by lightning. They're going down in
Yeah,
flames.
that the whole
Uh,
plane is in flames. Yeah.
Right. That would be bad
5,000
news.
degrees is or 50,000 degrees or whatever is not going to work out well.
Wouldn't there be a flash though? Like, I mean, if you're by a window and you get struck by lightning, wouldn't there be a flash? I mean, I'd imagine so, right? Like, how do you not know you're struck by lightning?
Yeah, if you're by the window and you're looking outside at the right moment, I assume you would see the flash. But yeah, obviously, the conditions of the day, if it's, daytime outside or, if it's dark, that will really play into it too. And, really lightning is just a bigger concern actually for the ground crews. And so, if you've ever been at an airport and been grounded for thunderstorms, it's probably either because of the wind or because the people on the ground can't go out and work because, hey, if they get struck by lightning, there's nothing really protecting them.
That's true. You don't want the bag handlers getting struck by lightning. That wouldn't be good.
No, absolutely not. Or a fuel truck.
Or the people with the what do they call those with the lights?
Oh man. Honestly, I don't really know the
They have the
technical name, but
batons.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're like the almost like the parade leaders. They're
the
Yeah.
crossing guards of the tarmac. Is that
yes,
Right,
right,
right.
exactly. So yeah, don't want them getting struck by lightning, and certainly not the fuel trucks either. So
And of course, the baggage handlers. I mean, how am I going to get my luggage afterwards if he gets struck? I mean, jeez,
Imagine your luggage gets caught on fire, like lightning strikes the bag.
Nobody, nobody's concerned about the handler. They're concerned about their luggage.
I mean,
I'm joking, obviously, everybody, but uh, totally joking. But yeah, turbulence. We talked a lot about around thunderstorms. So why is that so hard to forecast?
yeah, so I mean, turbulence is so hard to forecast, mainly because you can't really see it. A lot of turbulence is what's called clear air turbulence, and so what that is, I mean, it's just a bright blue sky. You look up, you see nothing up there, but you may not know it. It might be the roughest seas out there. For the airplanes flying up above, it just might be a nightmare for them. So it's really, difficult. It can be difficult to forecast because, you don't have things like radar or, satellite or even models really to kind of tell you, hey, this is where it's going to be. So you kind of really have to, own, your skill of forecasting, and you kind of have to, hone in on recognizing patterns and, what kind of different setups will actually create turbulent conditions. Besides thunderstorms, we really, it's really hard to detect turbulence unless we actually send a plane through there.
yeah, I was just about to ask if, like, I guess clear air turbulence is probably the most difficult type of turbulence to predict, or I guess detect, versus because obviously thunderstorms are going to have turbulence. Like, you can see a thunderstorm on radar, you can see how high the cloud is, cloud tops are, and I'm sure you probably can get an idea of kind of the wind speed at certain levels. But with clear air turbulence, it's beautiful out. Like, I mean, unless you have upper air data, you're not going to know.
Right, exactly. And that's where it really comes in. And that's actually kind of the communication aspect between meteorologists and airplanes, or pilots, I should say. They need us to get a forecast, for their flight, but we also kind of need them, to say, hey, like, what's going on up there, because we only get upper air data, once every 12 hours, and it's very, very spaced out. So airplanes have actually been a really useful tool for meteorologists nowadays, where we can ask, hey, what's it like up there? Or, airplanes are also now fitted with temperature sensors and wind sensors, pressure, and all that. So they're kind of like flying weather stations for us now, and it's really useful. And kind of it's where the trade-off comes in. We forecast for them, and they provide observations for us.
I'm just wondering again. We're still on the topic of turbulence, but I know there's times when you can or pilots can get into jet stream winds and they can really cut a lot of time off a flight or put tack time on the flight depending on how the jet stream's flowing across the country. Um, I mean, I don't know. There must be a lot of turbulence getting into the jet stream, I would imagine. But then once you're in, you're good, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, actually, no, you're very, very close, actually. I mean, the jet stream is a very turbulent area, but inside the jet stream, you're good. It's a nice, smooth, kind of steady and constant wind and speed and direction. But exiting or being near the jet stream is actually where the real turbulence comes in. It's kind of that difference, as you're, really calm winds and then you transition into the really strong winds. That transition area is where a lot of turbulence can be, and where really bad turbulence can reside a lot of the times. So pilots like to use that jet stream, but sometimes it can come with a few negative impacts, like flying through those turbulent areas.
Right, and I guess it doesn't really matter if you're going in or out, because either way you're getting some sort of uh, force and acceleration that's hitting your plane.
Right, absolutely. But luckily, turbulence. We keep hyping up here. Don't really want to scare anyone. It's really, really, uncommon to ever see, any fatalities. Even though there's turbulence all the time. Just in the past 30 years alone, there's been over, 200 and 40 some turbulence accidents reported, with 300 injuries, but only 3 fatalities worldwide. So you think about all the planes that are flying worldwide every single day. To have 3 in 30 years is really, really low. So even though turbulence might feel kind of scary at sometimes, that's why we try to forecast it as well as we can. But it is generally really safe, and a lot of it occurs really, really high up. So if a problem does happen, the pilots usually have quite a bit of time to react and figure out what to do.
Well, that's good to know. I was gonna add something in before, but when Mike was talking about the jet stream and like kind of getting into the jet stream, to go faster, I thought of the movie. I don't know if anyone has seen the movie Finding Nemo. But there's this one scene, and it's underwater, so it's different in a way. But they're trying to get to Sydney, Australia, faster, and they have to take these currents, and obviously these exist, ocean currents. But basically, they portray them as like these big tubes of water that are going really, really fast. And so when Mike was saying that, I'm thinking like, oh yeah, they have to get into the into these little streams, but it's tough because they're going really fast. So once you go into it, there's that turbulence aspect. The fish are, they almost kind of get like thrown into it like crazy, but then once they're in it, it's smooth sailing.
Yeah,
I just thought of
exactly.
that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I mean, yeah, you can almost think of it, like air is just as much as a fluid as water is. So, it's kind of like that, where the currents are just jet streams, and, the airplanes are fish. So, you think about it like that, it's a lot like Finding Nemo.
I didn't think we'd be talking about Finding Nemo in a aviation podcast.
Well, there's
Um,
flying fish, right?
oh, what are you, Brad? You know,
Hey, I have to keep it.
yeah, you gotta keep the crazy puns going, I guess.
Keep the corny jokes in.
Yeah, of course we need corny jokes, that's for sure.
Just keep swimming.
Anyway, switching gears out of thunderstorms and turbulence, things like that. I mean, in the wintertime, we have snow and ice that we have to be concerned about when it comes to flights and airplanes. I think one of the most problematic thing might be the icing that happens on the airplane itself. Correct?
Right. Yeah. No, icing is actually a major concern, just as much as turbulence, if not more, for aircraft. It can, sometimes it can just be, hey, a little bit of ice accumulated on our wings, and now it's melting as we land. Or, sometimes it can be, hey, our wing is totally iced up, and now we can't fly. So, it can get really serious really quickly. And, besides just the icing, on the aircraft, icing on the aircraft, it can lead to increased drag, or loss of lift of the plane, or reduced power, increased weight, reduced and then reduction of brake efficiency, obviously, on the ground. So ice can have all these sorts of really big impacts, as well as even accumulating on the windshield. And obviously you don't want to have your windshield full of ice, so you can't really see where you're going then. So icing is a really big concern. And because planes fly so high up in the atmosphere, it's always, below freezing up there generally where they're flying. So any clouds or any water vapor they interact with is going to be super cooled and is going to immediately attach onto the body of the aircraft. And so that's why if it's, winter or a winter storm, and there's a lot of rain or a lot of precipitation or a lot of water up in the clouds, that's why you'll have your icing trucks come out and they'll de-ice the plane, and you know put those solvents onto the wings to kind of deter the super cold water from attaching onto those wings and accumulating, and obviously creating problems for the aircraft and the pilots.
So you're saying that so the planes are not like, I always thought like the de-icing was on the ground, like when a plane's been sitting on the tarmac for a while and you get accumulation of ice on the plane. But you're saying that they spray stuff onto the plane so that when they take off in the air, any sort of water vapor or liquid that's falling, or if it's frozen, doesn't accrete onto the plane. Because I always thought like maybe there was some sort of like heating element to like maybe the wings or like the windshield that prevents. But again, it is like negative 20 degrees up there, so I don't know how much heat you need. But that's interesting to know.
Yeah, no, and the windshields do have heaters built into them, and actually they have windshield wipers too. So they they are similar to a car where you can just turn on the defroster, turn on the windshield wipers. Probably a little bit different than your car ones, but they serve the same purpose. And yeah, I mean it is mostly once they take off, but obviously they can't really apply de-icing solution once they're in the air. So it's kind of like if you sit on the ground for a really long time, they're like, all right, we got to de-ice you again, because, once you take off, you're on your own from there. And, anything that happens, the pilot's got to deal with.
And I guess planes, they don't have horns, right? Or maybe they do. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not thinking of a car. Horns, like,
No
yeah,
horns. No,
no
no
horns.
horns.
Don't
It,
need
it would
to.
be quite hard to hear. And I don't know who they'd be honking at. If they were close enough to be honking at someone, it would be a bit concerning. So,
I don't know. Birds.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't think they would be needing that, but there has been times where I've been on a passenger airliner, and I looked out the window and I could see in the distance there was another airplane, like not nearby, but you could see it in the distance, and I was just like, should that guy be that close to me or not? I mean, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just sitting here, watching the little monitor and telling me I'm going 550 miles an hour or whatever it might be. Uh,
right.
but
Yeah. It can be unnerving, seeing them, coming so close. But yeah, there's lots of systems in today's planes, as well as, the air traffic controllers that are always on watch and always monitoring, and, giving specific, almost like highways for the airplanes to fly along. So they can kind of keep track of them. And, there's these jet routes, across the United States that, aircraft use similar to highways, where they kind of get directed by air traffic control and say, all right, go merge with this jetway and then take it all the way to this place. And then you can exit, and go land. So, it's a bit more simplified, than it sounds, but, or than it is. But, that's essentially what the air traffic controllers are doing when, they're directing those commercial aircraft. And, that's how they keep them all in a row.
yeah, just go two lights down, make a left at the gas station, and then land at.
Turn right at the big rock and, yeah, then come in for a landing.
What is this? What do planes now have, like GPS, like navigation systems, like
Yeah,
in 200 miles, head right.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, yeah, you could say so.
Well, anyway, moving on to some more of your experience. You had an internship that I see that you dealt with some cloud seeding in North Dakota. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, it's very correct. And cloud seeding can be kind of a triggering term for some people. They might think, oh, it's chemtrails, and oh, they're putting stuff into the air. But actually, what this project does, this project's been around for many many years now, all the way back into I think the 80s, maybe even 70s. This project has been put on by the state government of North Dakota, and it's funded every summer. And what they do is they hire out this parent company called Weather Modification, and they supply pilots and planes. And then the state hires meteorologists to kind of direct these planes. And so what the planes do is, the meteorologist says, hey, there's a thunderstorm coming, and this thunderstorm might be capable of hail. And obviously, hail is really bad for crops. And if you've ever been to the Dakotas or the Great Plains, you'll know there's a lot of crops. So all the farmers up there, that's how they make their living. And if a hailstorm comes through and destroys their whole crop, they don't make any money that year. So a lot of these farmers, really want this project to stay around, because this project, what they do is they use aircraft to fly up to the thunderstorms, and then they seed the thunderstorms with silver iodide solution or dry ice or flares. And what these solutions do is kind of create more water molecules in the storm. And that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but actually, hail, when there's lesser water molecules, it can form into really, really big hailstones when it's up into up in the cold environment of the thunderstorm. But when you add more water droplets, it kind of inhibits that hail growth, and it makes the hail a lot smaller. So the hail is more like pea size or dime size rather than baseball or softball size. So if you're a farmer on the ground, pea size hail is definitely a lot better than seeing golf balls or baseballs coming down in your crops. And a lot of the times they even just eliminate the hail by making it small enough that it melts before it even reaches the ground.
Wow, I mean, I never even realized that that was kind of a project that was going on. So that's sounds super helpful for a lot of these farmers, that's for sure.
I've heard of these things, and oh man, I'm forgetting what the name of them are, but they were these. I don't know if they still use them, but like I'm sure you probably know this, Nate. They are instruments that I guess on the ground that they would shoot like sound, like hail cannons. Is that what they're called?
Yeah, I've heard of the hail cannons before. I'm not really sure about how effective they are. I think that's kind of still out in out for debate, but some people claim they work. I don't think many people use them. It's not very common that it's used, but I do know of at least a few instances where it has been used before. And I can't really speak on how effective it was, but I do know that this project, in North Dakota, it's been around the country as well. It's been in other places, and even in the winter they do it in like the California mountains and Wyoming. And what they do is they increase snowfall so that there's a larger snowpack and they have more fresh water in the spring and summertime for all the people.
And just for listener information, hail cannon is a shock wave generator aimed to disrupt the formation of hailstones in the atmosphere. So there you go, Mike. You had it. Hail cannons. Do they actually work?
It's like when you
you know,
question on TV when you buy a as seen on TV product, does it really work? you know,
yeah.
Sounds cool, but unless it
Sounds
actually
cool,
works.
idea's good, but in practicality, eh.
I mean, just in a quick Google search, I mean, I didn't do any more research than just doing this, but it just says, do hail cannons actually work? And they say there is no scientific evidence for their effectiveness. So I'm not saying they do or do not. I'm just reading right off what I searched. So, um, but I guess it is a little bit questionable.
Yeah, I'd imagine too, being in the neighborhood, you'd get pretty annoyed hearing that hail cannon booming and going off, every time there's a thunderstorm that goes up as well.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I don't know what type of noise it does make. So, um, hey, anyway, let's move on from these controversial subjects that we don't know if they do or do not work. So, I don't want to offend anybody out there if they think a hail cannon is the be all end all of hailstones. So, uh, space launches.
Ah,
Now,
space.
yeah, I mean, obviously up in space, we're not really dealing with atmospheric weather here on Earth, but you have to get through the atmosphere before you get to space. So I'm sure there are lots. of factors we have to deal with when we're coming to launching a rocket.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Space launches are even more critical for the weather because you think about it, an airplane, it costs a lot of money and, all that. But, space launches are lots and lots of money. And, if lightning was to hit a rocket, for example, it could have devastating consequences. They're not built like airplanes to have, multiple, to be able to take lightning strikes or, to be able to handle high winds. So, a lot of the times when a space launch is scrubbed to a later date or pushed back, delayed, it's a lot of times it's because the weather isn't good. And so they are constant contact with meteorologists that are monitoring the upper level winds and monitoring conditions for thunderstorms or the ability for lightning, even if it's not going to be a thunderstorm, because all of this is really going to be, really big, have really big impacts on the rocket itself and, the ability to launch it. Cold is actually a really big factor for rocket launches as well. That's why most rocket complexes are, so far south. They're in the warm weather. It's, you find them in Texas, Florida, California. You won't find them up, in Maine or, New York, where you're going to get a lot of cold a lot of the year. One of these more notable cases was the Challenger disaster. And actually, the Challenger disaster was because of the cold. There was O-rings on the rocket booster that kind of sealed them together. And these, O-rings weren't designed for cold temperatures being in Florida. And, days prior to the Challenger launch, they had temperatures below freezing in Florida. And, below freezing temperatures are super rare for Florida, but obviously it happened. And when it did, some of the engineers grew a bit concerned. They said, "Hey, these O rings, they might be too brittle. They might be, they might break in the cold." And that's exactly what happened. One of the O rings, it shriveled up. It was too frail, and when it broke, unfortunately, the whole entire rocket and space shuttle itself broke up as well. So, cold can have a huge impact, and it's why they always try to pick warmer climates, to avoid that. But winds can be just as dangerous. If there's a really strong gust really high up in the air, you think about it, a rocket, it's kind of when they detach, that first part of the rocket, that whole entire first half is empty. It was full of fuel at the ground, but now it's empty. So if you think about it, it's kind of like a big hollow tube, and before they detach it, if you have a really big wind gust, it's going to kind of spiral out of control and, send the rocket off course. So, winds and cold and, like I said, lightning is also a really big factor. Apollo 12 actually was struck by lightning as it launched. And actually, they almost didn't make it to space. They they were struck by lightning. It completely fried their guidance computer, and it like was sending all their electronics into haywire. And this was only moments after they launched. So immediately they had problems and they had to deal with them, as this rocket, this massive Saturn V rocket sending them up to the moon. And luckily, one of the astronauts was well trained and he knew, hey, I can switch to the auxiliary power. And he switched over to the auxiliary and he saved the entire mission. And if he hadn't done that, flip, they would have had to abort and we would have never made it to the moon on Apollo 12. It's just as important, in space as well as aviation. I would even argue it's more important for space. And they're constantly in contact with those meteorologists, and those meteorologists that forecast for space launches, especially the manned ones, I would say have one of the hardest jobs out there. They've got those people's lives in their hands, really, and they've got to make a decision, and they have to be right about it.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking to myself, I mean, I don't know if I'd want to be that meteorologist on duty. Um, that day when we're going to launch that rocket and conditions are iffy. I mean, yeah, if it's a nice day and everything's fine, that's different. Oh yeah, go ahead. But if it's like mission critical there, oof.
Right. And if you know Florida, you know that pop-up thunderstorms are almost a daily occurrence, especially in the summer. So, it can be pretty challenging for those meteorologists sometimes. They got to figure out, hey, it's a 50-50 shot. Okay, are we going to launch, or is there going to be a thunderstorm today? And they've got to know that. They have to figure it out, and they have to give a definitive answer. Hey, you're good to go. You're good, go for launch. Or hey, no, we got to delay this. We got to launch another day.
What about like we talked about landing for planes? What about entering the atmosphere again? So like re-entering Earth from space. Obviously, there's weather, considerations for that as well. Are they different, or are they about the same as to how they take off?
It's a little bit different because, they're coming in so fast. It's almost kind of like a bullet, coming through the atmosphere. And so if you think about a bullet just, shooting through the atmosphere, super fast, it's coming in, it's got all that fire and flames. And then once it, gets to the thicker parts of the atmosphere where the weather is, that's when they deploy the chutes. But yeah, it can be a really big concern, for landing a spacecraft, even because if you deploy those chutes and there's a thunderstorm around, you don't want to be in a capsule with parachutes. With a thunderstorm might be throwing you whichever direction it wants. So even back to Apollo, Apollo and even the first launches, they had alternate landing zones for the astronauts. So if the astronauts, weren't, the conditions weren't safe where they wanted to land, they would have another, alternate spot that they could go land that would have safer conditions. And same thing with the space shuttle. They never had to use it, luckily, but they had multiple places they could land a space shuttle, even overseas. I think there was one even in England or something that, they were able to use if they needed to. But luckily, fortunately, they, never had to. They only landed in Edwards in California, and obviously at the Kennedy Space Center down in Florida as well.
Yeah, well, hopefully they don't land in a hurricane. That would not be good.
No, hopefully not. That would be quite the news story, but not in a good way.
Well, anyway, soon, they're going to be launching the new Artemis mission that is supposed to take us back to the moon and then possibly to Mars, is what I hear.
Yeah.
Which sounds just absolutely insane, and I am not going to sign up for that meteorologist position.
Well, space is the final frontier. A captain once said that back in the day.
Are you
Captain Kirk?
channeling Brad again? I see.
One day we'll have our own enterprise that'll, maybe not the space shuttle, but we'll have a legit space ship into Mars.
I thought our co-host Brad Miller wasn't here, but I really think he's just feeding you lines in an earpiece. To
Oh, my cover's blown. All right, we gotta end this now.
Okay. Well, anyway, Nate, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I think this is really interesting, talking about weather and how it affects aviation and even space.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thanks.
Of course, yeah. Thanks so much for having me. I've had a great time.
Well, again, thanks a lot, Nate. And that is it for our podcast this week. Remember that the Weather Lounge has new podcasts every 2 weeks. So come back and give a listen. And you can find us on any platform you can find your podcast. So just search the Weather Lounge, and also visit weatherworksinc.com. That's our parent company. And you can find out about all we do with the weather. So that's it. Again, thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon in a new podcast.